You need to learn your place, and it's not in first class.
The cell phone footage was shaky, but the image was crystal clear. A young black man in a gray Northwestern University hoodie being forcibly dragged down the aisle of a Boeing 787 while passengers gasped and pointed their phones. Standing over him with a smug, triumphant smirk was Rebecca Martinez, the chief flight attendant, and Victoria Ashford, the wealthy socialite who wanted his seat. They thought they were taking out the trash. They thought he was just a confused economy passenger trying to sneak a taste of luxury. They were dead wrong. They didn't know that the man they were humiliating wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who had signed the acquisition papers for the entire airline 18 minutes ago. And when the plane doors opened, he wasn't going to jail. He was going to work. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if this story moves you even a little, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel because stories like this deserve to be heard. Now here's what nobody on that plane knew. In exactly 23 minutes, 4 careers would be destroyed, 1 empire would crumble, and aviation history would be rewritten. All because some people decided that a hoodie was more important than humanity. The air inside the first-class cabin of Apex Airlines Flight 847 from Chicago O'Hare to Miami smelled of fresh orchids and expensive leather. A sharp contrast to the biting November wind swirling across the tarmac outside. Marcus Williams adjusted the hood of his faded charcoal gray university sweatshirt, pulling it slightly lower over his eyes. He wasn't hiding exactly. He was just exhausted. At 32 years old, Marcus was the quiet force behind Vanguard Global Networks, a logistics and AI infrastructure firm that had silently become the backbone of global shipping. He had spent the last 84 hours in a windowless boardroom in downtown Chicago, negotiating the most aggressive hostile takeover of the decade. He hadn't slept, he hadn't shaved, and frankly, he knew he looked like he had just rolled out of a dorm room rather than a boardroom. But appearances had never mattered to Marcus. Power, real power, didn't need a uniform. It didn't need to announce itself. It just was. He dropped his heavy, battered leather duffel bag, a sentimental keepsake from his late father, onto the floor beside seat 2A, the bulkhead seat he had specifically requested. The irony wasn't lost on him that in 18 minutes, when those acquisition papers finished processing through the legal department, he would technically own this seat, this plane, and every other aircraft in the Apex Airlines fleet. Marcus settled into the plush leather seat and closed his eyes for a moment. The flight was scheduled to depart at 2:47 p.m. Right now it was 2:29, 18 minutes. That's all the time left before his secret became reality. 18 minutes ago, Marcus had sat in a mahogany-paneled conference room on the 47th floor of the Willis Tower, his signature still wet on the final acquisition documents. Across from him, the desperate board of directors of Apex Airlines had just sold him their company for $3.2 billion, a fire sale price for an airline hemorrhaging money and reputation. Mr. Williams, the board chairman, had said, sliding the papers across the polished table, "You now own the 5th largest airline in North America." Marcus had nodded once, his expression unchanged. "The paperwork will process within 30 minutes. Until then, this acquisition remains confidential." His assistant, Elena Rodriguez, had confirmed the timeline with a subtle nod. The beauty of corporate acquisitions was in their bureaucratic precision. Legal teams, regulatory filings, stock exchange notifications. All of it took time to process through the official channels, which meant Marcus Williams, new owner of Apex Airlines, was about to board his own aircraft as a complete stranger. His phone buzzed once. Elena's message was simple. Acquisition filing submitted. Official ownership transfer in 19 minutes. Board members unaware of timeline. Marcus smiled slightly. The board members thought they had weeks to break the news to their employees to prepare their staff for new ownership. They had no idea that their new CEO was about to experience their company culture firsthand. He had built his empire on a simple philosophy. True power doesn't announce itself. It observes, it learns, and then it acts. Today he would observe. Tomorrow he would act. Marcus slipped his phone into his pocket and looked around the first-class cabin. 16 seats arranged in a 2-2 configuration, each one representing the premium experience that Apex Airlines marketed to wealthy travelers. The cabin was nearly empty this early in the boarding process, but he could already see other passengers beginning to filter in. In seat 3B, a businessman in an expensive suit was settling in with his Wall Street Journal. David Miller, based on the name visible on his boarding pass, appeared to be in his mid-30s, with the confident air of someone accustomed to first-class travel. He had already pulled out his phone, seemingly preparing to document his journey for social media. Across the aisle in seat 4A, a young woman was adjusting her phone mount on the tray table. Jennifer Santos, according to her luggage tag, looked like she was in her late 20s with the polished appearance of someone who lived her life online. Her phone screen showed what appeared to be an Instagram Live setup, complete with ring light and professional microphone. The cabin was filling with the usual first-class demographic business travelers, social media influencers, and wealthy passengers who expected premium treatment. Marcus fit none of these categories in appearance, and he knew it. That was exactly the point. Marcus had learned long ago that the most valuable insights came from being underestimated. When people looked at him and saw just a young black man in casual clothes, they revealed their true selves. They showed him who they really were when they thought no one important was watching, and Marcus was always watching. He thought back to when he was 16 years old, dressed in his best khakis and polo shirt for a job interview at a local restaurant in Detroit. The manager had taken one look at him and said, "We're not hiring your type right now. Try the McDonald's down the street." That night, Marcus had written in his journal, "Someday I'll own places like this, and I'll make sure no kid ever hears those words again." 15 years and $8 billion later, he was keeping that promise. Marcus opened his eyes as movement in the aisle caught his attention. A flight attendant was approaching, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her lips painted a severe crimson red. Her name tag read, Rebecca Martinez, Senior Flight Attendant, and she was looking at him with the kind of expression usually reserved for unexpected stains on white carpet. Rebecca wasn't looking at his face. She was looking at the fraying cuffs of his hoodie, at the worn fabric of his jeans, at the scuffed leather of his father's old duffel bag. She was cataloging everything about him that didn't belong in her pristine first-class cabin. Behind her, Marcus could see a younger Latina flight attendant watching the interaction with obvious discomfort. Sofia Rivera, based on her name tag, appeared to be in her mid-20s with kind eyes that suggested she wasn't comfortable with whatever was about to happen. The countdown continued in Marcus's mind. 16 minutes until the acquisition became official. 16 minutes until he technically owned the aircraft he was sitting in. 16 minutes until he became the boss of every person who was about to judge him. But for now, he was just another passenger. And that passenger was about to receive an education in how Apex Airlines treated people who didn't fit their preferred demographic. Marcus straightened in his seat, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. This was about to get interesting. The plane's engines hummed quietly in the background as more passengers boarded, each one taking their place in the careful hierarchy of air travel. First class, business class, premium economy, regular economy. Everyone in their proper place, everyone knowing their role. Everyone except the man in seat 2A who owned it all. "Sir, this section is for first-class passengers only. Economy boarding is through the rear." Rebecca Martinez's voice carried across the cabin with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. She stood over Marcus with her arms crossed, her posture radiating disapproval and barely contained annoyance. Marcus looked up from his phone, blinking away the fatigue that had been weighing on his eyelids. He didn't have the energy for this conversation, but he could see it was happening whether he wanted it or not. He simply reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out his boarding pass, holding it out with a polite, tired smile. "I'm in 2A," Marcus said softly, his voice hoarse from 84 hours of negotiations. "It's been a long week. I just want to sleep." Rebecca didn't take the ticket. She barely glanced at it. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of suspicion and annoyance, as if his presence was a personal insult to her carefully maintained cabin standards. After a moment of deliberate hesitation, she snatched the boarding pass from his hand with 2 fingers, treating it like contaminated evidence. She scanned the barcode with her device, her eyes narrowing as she read the information on her screen. J. Williams, Seat 2A. Full fare ticket, not an upgrade, not a miles redemption. Paid in cash 3 days ago for $7,847. She scoffed, shoving the ticket back at him with enough force that the corner poked into his chest. "These systems glitch all the time. People like you often get misassigned to seats you can't afford." The words hung in the air like smoke. "People like you." Marcus took back his boarding pass without comment, but something in his eyes shifted. Behind Rebecca, Sophia Rivera visibly winced. From his seat in 3B, David Miller looked up from his Wall Street Journal, his businessman's instincts telling him that something inappropriate was happening. "We'll see about that." Rebecca continued spinning on her heel toward the galley. "Don't get too comfortable. These booking errors usually sort themselves out once we verify with the gate." She marched away without offering Marcus a welcome drink, a hot towel, or even basic courtesy. The message was clear: he didn't belong here, and she intended to prove it. Marcus settled back into his seat and buckled his seatbelt. He was used to this. No matter how many billions sat in his investment portfolio, no matter how many Forbes features had called him the invisible titan of global logistics to people like Rebecca Martinez, he would always be an interloper who needed to prove his right to exist in their spaces. He checked his phone. 14 minutes until the acquisition became official. 14 minutes until Rebecca Martinez became his employee. The irony was almost too perfect. Around him, the first-class cabin continued to fill with its typical demographics. But the atmosphere had already shifted. Other passengers had witnessed the interaction, and the comfortable bubble of premium travel had developed a small, uncomfortable leak. David Miller was no longer reading his newspaper. Instead, he was discreetly observing the cabin dynamics with the keen eye of someone who recognized discrimination when he saw it. As a successful consulting firm partner who had built his career on reading room dynamics, he knew the signs of bias disguised as policy. Jennifer Santos was adjusting her phone setup in 4A, but Marcus could see her glancing in his direction. As a social media influencer with 200,000 followers, she had developed an instinct for content that her audience would find compelling. Discrimination caught on camera was exactly the kind of viral content that drove engagement and social change. The 10 minutes passed slowly, filled with the typical sounds of pre-flight preparation. Flight attendants moved through the cabin offering drinks and assistance to passengers. Rebecca Martinez made a point of visiting every seat except 2A. She chatted warmly with David Miller about his business travel preferences. She complimented Jennifer Santos on her professional camera setup. She even stopped to help an elderly passenger in 1B adjust his seatbelt. But Marcus remained invisible, a deliberate oversight that wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. Sophia Rivera, meanwhile, was growing increasingly uncomfortable. During her 6 months with Apex Airlines, she had witnessed subtle forms of bias before, but nothing this overt. She found excuses to walk past Marcus's seat, offering apologetic smiles and small gestures of welcome that her supervisor couldn't see. "Can I get you anything to drink, sir?" Sophia asked quietly during one of these passes. "Water would be great," Marcus replied with a genuine smile. "Thank you." When Sophia returned with a bottle of premium water and a warm cloth, Rebecca intercepted her. "Ms. Rivera," Rebecca said sharply, "that passenger's status hasn't been verified yet. We don't provide service until gate confirmation." Sophia's face flushed. His boarding pass shows a potential error. Rebecca cut her off. Until security clears this up, we maintain our standards. The exchange wasn't quiet. Other passengers heard it, and the temperature in the cabin seemed to drop several degrees. David Miller was now openly staring, his expression growing darker by the minute. Jennifer Santos had started recording discreetly, her influencer instincts telling her that this moment needed to be preserved. That's when the real disruption arrived. The peace was shattered by a voice that sounded like a chainsaw cutting through silk. "This is absolutely unacceptable. I specifically requested the bulkhead for my circulation issues." Standing at the entrance of the cabin was a woman who looked like she was wearing the entire GDP of a small nation. Victoria Ashford was draped in a leopard print coat that probably cost more than most cars, clutching a Birkin bag, with the casual confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. Victoria was a fixture in Chicago society pages, the widow of real estate mogul Harrison Ashford, known for throwing wine at servers who didn't move fast enough and suing her own gardeners for inadequate topiary maintenance. She was 52 years old, but maintained the kind of artificial perfection that money could buy, from her platinum blonde hair to her surgically enhanced features. She was pointing a manicured finger directly at Marcus. Rebecca Martinez immediately transformed from suspicious authority figure to fawning servant. "Mrs. Ashford, please, I apologize for any confusion at the gate. We'll sort this out immediately." "I don't want it sorted." Victoria snapped, her eyes locked onto Marcus like a predator sizing up prey. "I want my seat. Why is that person sitting in 2A? That's my lucky seat. I always fly 2A on Apex." Rebecca's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, though everyone in the cabin could hear every word. "I understand your frustration, Mrs. Ashford. It seems there was a computer error. We have a standby passenger who was incorrectly assigned to your preferred seat." Marcus sat up straight. "Standby passenger? Excuse me?" Marcus said, his voice deeper now. The exhaustion replaced by a flicker of controlled irritation. "I'm not standby. I paid full fare for this seat 3 days ago." Victoria Ashford recoiled as if the seat itself had suddenly started speaking. She looked at Marcus with sheer incredulity, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising toward her hairline. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice sharp with indignation. "Are you speaking to me?" "I'm speaking to the situation," Marcus said calmly, unbuckling his seatbelt and sitting forward. "I have a valid ticket for this seat." Rebecca stepped between them, her back to Victoria, facing Marcus with a mask of cold hostility. "Sir, you need to lower your voice. You are disturbing our VIP guests." "I am a guest," Marcus said, his patience beginning to thin like ice in spring. "And I'm in my assigned seat." Victoria laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made several passengers visibly cringe. She gestured dismissively at Marcus's hoodie and jeans. "Look at him, Rebecca. He looks like he's here to rob the galley, not sit in first class. Are we really letting standards drop this low?" The words hit the cabin like a physical blow. David Miller's newspaper crumpled in his hands. Jennifer Santos's phone, which had been recording discreetly, was now openly capturing the exchange. Even the elderly passenger in 1B was staring in disbelief. "I pay $8,000 for a ticket to avoid exactly this." Victoria continued, waving her hand vaguely at Marcus's entire existence. "Honey, are we really going to pretend this is appropriate?" Marcus stared at her, feeling that familiar heat rising in his chest. The same heat he had learned to suppress in boardrooms, full of old white men who assumed he was the IT support when he walked in to buy their companies. But this was different. He wasn't working right now. He was a customer. He was a human being who had paid for a service and was being denied it because of the color of his skin. "My clothes don't determine my seat assignment," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that made Sofia Rivera step back involuntarily. Rebecca leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. Listen to me carefully. Mrs. Ashford is a Diamond Medallion member. She has been flying with this airline for 15 years. She is a priority passenger who generates significant revenue for this company. She paused, letting that sink in. You, on the other hand, are clearly an error in our booking. Computer glitches happen all the time, especially with these discount booking sites. I am going to need you to gather your things and move back to row 42. There's a middle seat available. I'll comp you a meal voucher for the inconvenience. The audacity of it hung in the air like toxic gas. Row 42, middle seat, a meal voucher. Marcus looked at Rebecca Martinez. He looked at Victoria Ashford, who was already checking her diamond-encrusted watch and tapping her foot impatiently. He thought about the 16-year-old kid who had been kicked out of a restaurant for looking suspicious. He thought about every boardroom where he had been mistaken for the help. He thought about the acquisition papers that were processing through legal channels at this very moment. And then Marcus Williams, soon-to-be owner of Apex Airlines, said the word that would change everything. No. The cabin went silent. Not the comfortable quiet of a luxury aircraft, but the heavy silence that falls when something fundamental has shifted in the social order. The businessman in 2B lowered his Wall Street Journal completely. The elderly passenger in 1B leaned forward to get a better view. Jennifer Santos stopped pretending her recording was discreet and pointed her phone directly at the confrontation. "Excuse me, Rebecca?" Martinez blinked, genuinely stunned. In 15 years of flight attendant service, she had never had a passenger simply refuse to comply with her instructions. "I said no," Marcus repeated, leaning back in his seat and crossing his arms. "I paid for this seat. I'm staying in this seat. If Mrs. Ashford has circulation issues, perhaps she should have made her seating preferences clear when she booked her ticket." Victoria Ashford gasped like she had been physically slapped. Her face flushed red beneath her foundation, and her perfectly manicured hands began to shake with indignation. "Get the captain!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch that made other passengers wince. "Get the captain right now! I will not be insulted by this thug!" The word hung in the cabin like a toxic cloud. Thug. There it was, the mask finally slipping away to reveal the ugly truth underneath. David Miller stood up from his seat, his newspaper forgotten. "Ma'am, that language is completely inappropriate." "Mind your own business," Victoria snapped at him. "This doesn't concern you. Discrimination concerns everyone." David replied firmly, pulling out his own phone to join Jennifer in documenting the incident. Rebecca's face had turned a blotchy red that clashed with her crimson lipstick. "Sir, this is your last warning. Move to your correct seat, or I will have you removed from this aircraft." Marcus looked at her with the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. "Go get the captain." Rebecca spun on her heel and marched toward the cockpit, her aggressive footsteps echoing through the cabin. Behind her, Victoria continued her theatrical performance, calling someone on her phone in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Senator Morrison." "Yes, it's Victoria Ashford. I'm being harassed on one of your constituent airlines by some thug who thinks he belongs in first class." "Yes, I think the FAA needs to investigate how Apex Airlines allows this kind of security breach." Marcus closed his eyes and pulled out his phone. 11 minutes until the acquisition became official. 11 minutes until he technically owned the aircraft he was sitting in, the captain Rebecca had gone to fetch, and the woman who was currently threatening to have him arrested. He opened his secure messaging app and typed a quick message to Elena Rodriguez. "Status update." The response came back immediately. "Acquisition processing normally. Legal estimates, 12 minutes until official transfer. Board notification scheduled for 3:15 p.m. "Are you ready?" Marcus typed back. "More ready than you know." Meanwhile, the cabin had become a study in human behavior under pressure. Jennifer Santos was now live streaming to her 200,000 followers, providing real-time commentary on what she was witnessing. "Guys, I am literally watching discrimination happen in real time," she whispered to her phone. This black passenger bought a first-class ticket, and they're trying to force him to economy because some rich white woman wants his seat. This is 2024, and we're still dealing with this. The comments on her live stream were exploding. Apex Airlines began trending on Twitter within minutes, with thousands of users demanding accountability and justice. David Miller had moved to an empty seat closer to Marcus, positioning himself as a witness and ally. As a partner at a major consulting firm, he understood the legal implications of what was happening and wanted to ensure it was properly documented. Sir David said to Marcus, "I want you to know that what's happening here is not okay. I'm recording everything, and I'll provide testimony if needed." Sofia Rivera was standing near the galley looking increasingly distressed. She had witnessed bias before, but never anything this blatant or aggressive. Her training told her to support her supervisor, but her conscience was screaming that this was wrong. "Sophia," she heard Rebecca's voice calling from the cockpit door, "bring me the passenger manifest. I want to verify this man's booking status immediately." Sophia reluctantly retrieved the tablet that contained the passenger information. As she accessed Marcus's booking record, her eyes widened. Not only was his ticket legitimate, it was one of the most expensive seats on the plane. Full fare purchased 3 days in advance with a credit card that showed a billing address in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. But Rebecca wasn't interested in facts anymore. She had committed to a course of action based on assumptions and prejudice, and backing down now would mean admitting she was wrong. For someone who had built her career on authority and control, that admission was unthinkable. The cockpit door opened and Captain Robert Hayes emerged. Hayes was a 51-year-old veteran pilot with 20 years of experience and the kind of old-school demeanor that belonged to a different era of aviation. He was tall and imposing in his crisp uniform with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to having his authority respected without question. Captain Hayes had built his reputation on running a tight ship, maintaining order, and dealing decisively with problem passengers. He had no patience for people who didn't understand the hierarchy of air travel or their place within it. "What seems to be the problem here?" Hayes asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. Rebecca launched into her explanation, painting Marcus as an uncooperative passenger with a questionable ticket who was disturbing VIP guests and refusing to follow crew instructions. She conveniently left out the racial undertones of the confrontation and the explicit discrimination that had occurred. Hayes listened with the expression of someone who had heard this story many times before. In his experience, these situations usually involved passengers who had purchased upgrade scams online or were trying to sneak into premium cabins where they didn't belong. He approached Marcus's seat with the measured steps of someone about to deliver an ultimatum. "Son," Hayes said, towering over Marcus in his full uniform, "I've been flying for 2 decades. I can spot trouble from a mile away, and right now you're looking like trouble." The word "son" hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been called boy in boardrooms, son in restaurants, and every other diminutive term that older white men used to remind younger black men of their perceived place in the social hierarchy. "I'm not your son," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous undertone. "And I'm not moving." Hayes's expression hardened. "Listen here, young man. This is my aircraft, and I have the authority to remove any passenger who threatens the safety and comfort of other travelers. Mrs. Ashford is a valued customer who has legitimate concerns about this situation." "What legitimate concerns?" Marcus asked, his calm demeanor beginning to crack slightly. "That a black man is sitting in a seat he paid for." "Don't make this about race," Hayes said dismissively. "This is about following instructions and respecting authority." David Miller couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Captain, with all due respect, this passenger has done nothing wrong. He has a valid ticket. He's been calm and respectful, and he's being harassed because of his appearance." Hayes turned his attention to David with obvious irritation. "Sir, unless you want to be removed as well, I suggest you stay out of this." Victoria Ashford had finished her phone call and was now standing behind the captain like a general preparing for battle. "Captain, I've been flying first class for longer than that boy has been alive. I know quality passengers when I see them, and that is not one. The racial tension in the cabin was now so thick it was almost visible. Other passengers were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some recording discreetly, others making phone calls to report what they were witnessing. Marcus felt the familiar rage building in his chest, the same fury he had learned to channel into business success over the years. But this time was different. This time he had the power to do something about it. 9 minutes until the acquisition became official. 9 minutes until he owned everything and everyone involved in this humiliation. You have two choices. Captain Hayes announced loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. You can move to an available seat in economy voluntarily, or I can have airport security escort you off this aircraft. What's it going to be? Marcus looked around the cabin. He saw Jennifer Santos live streaming the confrontation to thousands of viewers. He saw David Miller recording everything on his phone. He saw Sofia Rivera standing near the galley with tears in her eyes. He saw the other first-class passengers watching with a mixture of discomfort and morbid curiosity. And he made his decision. I'll wait for security, Marcus said calmly. I want this conversation to be official. Hayes reached for the aircraft phone to call ground security. Airport operations. This is Captain Hayes on Apex 847. I need security personnel at gate B23. We have an uncooperative passenger, possibly intoxicated, refusing to follow crew instructions and disrupting other travelers. The lie was smooth and practiced. Hayes had used similar language before to justify removals that were based more on bias than on legitimate security concerns. Within minutes, Carlos Rodriguez, the airport security chief, boarded the aircraft with 2 officers. Rodriguez was a 45-year-old Hispanic man with 15 years of law enforcement experience who had seen his share of airline disputes. He was generally fair-minded but tended to support crew authority in passenger conflicts. What's the situation? Rodriguez asked Hayes. This passenger claims to have a first-class ticket, but the manifest shows him as standby. Hayes lied smoothly. He's been verbally abusive to our VIP guests and is refusing to cooperate with seating adjustments. Rodriguez looked at Marcus taking in the hoodie, the jeans, and the expensive carry-on bag. His experienced eye told him that something didn't add up, but he had learned to trust pilot authority in these situations. Sir Rodriguez said to Marcus, I need to see your boarding pass and identification. Marcus handed over both documents without comment. Rodriguez examined them carefully, then cross-referenced them with his handheld device. The ticket appears to be legitimate, Rodriguez said to Hayes. Full fare seat 2A purchased 3 days ago. Computer error. Rebecca interjected quickly. We've seen this before with booking scams. The credit card was probably stolen. Victoria Ashford stepped forward with her most imperious voice. Officer, this man threatened me. I felt unsafe. I demand he be removed immediately. Marcus remained calm throughout the exchange, but Jennifer Santos's live stream was capturing every word. Her follower count had jumped to 75,000 active viewers, and Apex Air racism was trending nationally. Sir Rodriguez said to Marcus, Even if your ticket is legitimate, if you've made other passengers feel threatened, I need to ask you to voluntarily deplane while we sort this out. What threat did I make? Marcus asked. I'd like Mrs. Ashford to repeat exactly what I said that she found threatening. Victoria's face flushed. You were looking at me in a threatening manner. I looked at you, Marcus confirmed. Is that illegal now? The absurdity of the situation was becoming apparent even to Rodriguez. A black man was being accused of making threats by looking at a white woman who wanted his seat. But the crew was united in their version of events, and airport security generally deferred to airline authority. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to voluntarily move to another seat to de-escalate this situation. Marcus looked around the cabin one final time. The countdown in his mind showed 7 minutes until the acquisition became official. 7 minutes until he would own everyone involved in this humiliation. But right now, in this moment, he was just another black man being told that his money, his dignity, and his humanity didn't matter as much as the comfort of white passengers who didn't want to share space with him. "I paid for this seat," Marcus said quietly. "I've done nothing wrong. If you're going to remove me, you'll have to do it by force." Rodriguez sighed. He didn't want to physically remove a calm passenger, but the crew was insisting and he had protocols to follow. "Sir, if you won't comply voluntarily, we'll have to escort you off the aircraft." And that's when Marcus Williams, CEO and owner of Vanguard Global Networks, soon to be owner of Apex Airlines, made the decision that would change everything. He stood up, placed his hands behind his back, and said, "Then do what you have to do." Carlos Rodriguez looked at Marcus Williams standing calmly with his hands behind his back, and something deep in his gut told him this was wrong. In 15 years of law enforcement, he had developed an instinct for situations that didn't add up, and this was one of them. A well-dressed passenger with a legitimate ticket calm demeanor and no history of disruption was being painted as a threat by crew members who couldn't articulate what he had actually done wrong. But airport security protocols were clear. When flight crew requested passenger removal, security was supposed to comply first and investigate later. The safety of the flight took precedence over individual passenger rights. "Sir, I'm placing you under temporary detention for disrupting aircraft operations," Rodriguez said reluctantly. "You'll need to come with us." Marcus nodded once his expression unchanged. "I understand you're doing your job, Officer Rodriguez. I want you to know that I don't blame you for this." The calm dignity in Marcus's voice gave Rodriguez pause. Most passengers being removed from aircraft were angry, belligerent, or defensive. This man was responding like someone who had expected this outcome and was prepared for it. Rebecca Martinez stepped forward with obvious satisfaction. "Finally, some people need to learn that rules apply to everyone." Victoria Ashford was already moving toward seat 2A, claiming her prize. "Thank God. I thought we'd be delayed all day." As Rodriguez and his officers prepared to escort Marcus down the aisle, Jennifer Santos made a decision that would amplify this moment far beyond the confines of the aircraft. She stood up from her seat in 4A and spoke directly to her live stream audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am watching a paying passenger being removed from this plane because he's black and some rich white woman wants his seat. His name is on the ticket, he paid full price, and he's done absolutely nothing wrong. This is happening right now on Apex Airlines Flight 847, and 75,000 of you are witnessing it live." Her words rang through the cabin like a gunshot. Other passengers who had been filming discreetly now held their phones openly. David Miller positioned himself to get the best angle of Marcus being escorted away. Even the elderly passenger in 1B was recording on his tablet. "Ma'am, please sit down," Rebecca snapped at Jennifer. "You're interfering with security operations." "I'm documenting discrimination," Jennifer replied firmly. "The world needs to see this." As Marcus was led toward the front of the aircraft, he maintained his dignity with every step. He didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't provide any ammunition for those who would later claim he was disruptive or threatening. He simply walked with quiet strength while phones captured every moment. But then Victoria Ashford made the mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. As Marcus passed her newly claimed seat, she couldn't resist one final insult. "Maybe this will teach you to know your place," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "People like you need to understand that money can't buy class." Marcus stopped walking. He turned and looked directly at Victoria Ashford with an expression that made everyone in the cabin fall silent. "Mrs. Ashford," he said quietly, "you're absolutely right. Money can't buy class. But it can buy accountability." There was something in his voice, a quiet authority that made even Rodriguez pause. For a moment, Victoria looked uncertain, as if she had just heard something that didn't quite make sense. But then Rebecca was pushing from behind, eager to remove this embarrassment from her cabin. "Keep moving. You've caused enough disruption." Marcus resumed walking, his head held high. As he reached the aircraft door, he turned back one final time and looked at the sea of phones recording his humiliation. "Remember this moment," he said clearly. "Justice has a way of finding balance." The walk down the jet bridge felt eternal. Airport security escorted Marcus through the terminal while curious travelers stopped to stare and point. Some recognized the scene from social media as Jennifer's live stream had been picked up by news outlets and was being broadcast in real time. Behind them, Apex Airlines Flight 847 sat at the gate while the crew prepared for departure. Rebecca Martinez was finally serving champagne to the first-class passengers. Her mood dramatically improved now that the problem had been resolved. Victoria Ashford was settling into seat 2A with obvious satisfaction, already planning her social media posts about the security incident she had helped resolve. Captain Hayes was in the cockpit filing his incident report with language that portrayed Marcus as an agitated passenger with suspicious documentation who had been removed for the safety of other travelers. The report would become part of Marcus's permanent record with the airline, flagging him as someone to watch on future flights. None of them knew that in 4 minutes, Marcus Williams would technically own their jobs, their aircraft, and their futures. In the security office, Marcus sat calmly, while Rodriguez processed the paperwork for his temporary detention. Standard procedure required documentation, witness statements, and notification of the airline's corporate security team. "Mr. Williams," Rodriguez said, reading from the boarding pass, "I have to ask you directly. Did you make any threatening statements or gestures toward Mrs. Ashford or the flight crew?" "No, I did not." "Did you use any profanity or raise your voice during the confrontation?" "No, I did not." Rodriguez frowned as he watched the security footage from the aircraft door cameras. The video clearly showed Marcus remaining calm throughout the entire incident. His voice never rose. His posture never became aggressive, and his responses were measured and respectful. "Sir, I have to be honest with you. Based on what I'm seeing here, this looks like a civil rights violation rather than a security issue." Marcus nodded. "Officer Rodriguez, you were put in an impossible situation by people who abused their authority. I hope you'll remember that when this story becomes public." "When it becomes public?" Rodriguez asked. Marcus smiled slightly and pulled out his phone. The screen showed dozens of news alerts, social media notifications, and missed calls from reporters. Apex Air racism was now the #1 trending topic nationally, with over 500,000 mentions in the last 30 minutes. "It already is public," Marcus said. "And it's about to become much more interesting." At exactly 3:03 p.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with the notification he had been waiting for. A secure message from Elena Rodriguez, acquisition official, as of 3:02 p.m. "You are now the legal owner of Apex Airlines. Board notification sent." "How would you like to proceed?" Marcus typed back. "Send the legal team to Gate B23 immediately. Corporate takeover protocols in effect." Rodriguez watched Marcus typing with growing confusion. This wasn't the behavior of someone who had just been humiliated and detained. This was the behavior of someone who was planning something. "Mr. Williams, is there something I should know about this situation?" Marcus looked up from his phone with an expression that had changed completely. The exhausted passenger was gone, replaced by something else entirely. Something that made Rodriguez's law enforcement instincts stand at attention. "Officer Rodriguez, I need you to understand something very important. In approximately 5 minutes, my legal team is going to arrive here with documentation that will fundamentally change this situation. When they do, I want you to know that you conducted yourself professionally and with integrity. That will be remembered." What kind of documentation? Marcus stood up, his entire demeanor shifting from detained passenger to something that Rodriguez couldn't quite identify but instinctively recognized as power. Real power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself, but commanded respect through presence alone. The kind that proves I wasn't just a passenger on that flight, Officer Rodriguez. I was the owner. Back at the gate, Apex Airlines Flight 847 was finally preparing to push back from the gate. The passenger manifest had been finalized, the cargo loaded, and the crew was going through their final safety checks. Rebecca Martinez was making her pre-flight announcement to the first-class cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Apex Airlines Flight 847 with service to Miami. We apologize for the slight delay due to a security situation, but we're now ready for departure. We appreciate your patience and look forward to providing you with excellent service during today's flight." Victoria Ashford raised her champagne glass in mock celebration. "Thank goodness that's over. I was starting to think we'd never get rid of him." David Miller, still recording on his phone, captured her comment along with the approving laughter from other first-class passengers. Jennifer Santos was providing live commentary to her audience, which had now grown to over 100,000 viewers. "So they've removed the black passenger, and the rich white lady is celebrating in his seat," Jennifer narrated. "The crew is acting like heroes for enforcing what was basically Jim Crow policies at 30,000 feet. In the cockpit, Captain Hayes was receiving a call from Apex Airlines Operations Center. The voice on the other end was urgent and confused. "Captain Hayes, we're getting some unusual communications from our corporate legal department. Something about new ownership and passenger incident protocols. Are you aware of any ownership changes?" Hayes frowned. "Negative operations. No one's mentioned anything about ownership changes to flight crews. We're trying to get clarification, but there seems to be some confusion at the corporate level. Stand by for further instructions." Hayes hung up the radio with a growing sense of unease. In 20 years of flying, he had never heard operations sound so confused and uncertain about chain of command issues. Meanwhile, at security, Marcus was watching the clock on his phone. 3:06 p.m. His legal team should be arriving any moment, and the fun was about to begin. True to Elena's efficiency, Marcus could see 3 people in expensive suits walking purposefully through the terminal toward the security office. Sarah Martinez, his lead corporate attorney, James Thompson, his merger and acquisition specialist, and Elena Rodriguez herself carrying a briefcase that Marcus knew contained the documentation that would turn this day into a case study in corporate justice. Officer Rodriguez saw them approaching and instinctively stood up. These weren't typical airport visitors. These were professionals with the kind of presence that suggested serious legal authority. "Mr. Williams, Sarah Martinez," said as she entered the office, "we've reviewed the security footage and social media coverage of the incident. We're prepared to proceed with immediate corrective action." She opened her briefcase and placed a stack of legal documents on Rodriguez's desk. "Officer Rodriguez, my client has been unlawfully detained and discriminated against by employees of Apex Airlines. These documents confirm that as of 3:02 p.m. today, Mr. Marcus Williams became the sole owner of Apex Airlines through a completed acquisition." Rodriguez stared at the documents, then at Marcus, then back at the documents. "You own the airline." "I own the airline," Marcus confirmed, "including Flight 847, which is still sitting at Gate B23 with employees who just violated federal civil rights laws." Elena Rodriguez pulled out a tablet and showed Rodriguez the official acquisition announcement that had just been released to the press. Vanguard Global Networks completes $3.2 billion acquisition of Apex Airlines, CEO Marcus Williams to assume direct control. "The passengers who humiliated my client, James Thompson, added, are currently sitting in an aircraft owned by the man they just had arrested. I believe it's time to correct this situation." Rodriguez looked at Marcus with a new understanding. "Sir, I owe you an apology. You were doing your job, Officer Rodriguez. But now, I need to do mine." Marcus walked toward the security office door flanked by his legal team. For the first time since boarding Flight 847, he looked like exactly what he was, a billionaire CEO who owned airlines instead of just flying on them. "Elena, call the aircraft," Marcus said. "Tell them the new owner wants to have a conversation with the crew." The walk from the security office back to Gate B23 felt like a victory parade. Marcus Williams moved with the confident stride of someone who had just been transformed from victim to victor in the span of a single phone call. Behind him, his legal team followed in formation. Sarah Martinez reviewing federal discrimination statutes on her tablet, James Thompson coordinating with corporate communications, and Elena Rodriguez fielding calls from news outlets that were already picking up the acquisition story. At Gate B-23, Apex Airlines Flight 847 sat ready for pushback, completely unaware that their new owner was approaching with documentation legal authority and a very personal score to settle. Marcus could see through the aircraft windows that the crew was going through final pre-flight procedures. Rebecca Martinez was collecting champagne glasses from first-class passengers. Captain Hayes was reviewing his flight plan in the cockpit. Victoria Ashford was settling into seat 2A like a queen claiming her throne. None of them had any idea that their lives were about to change forever. Mr. Williams. Elena said, holding up her phone, the acquisition announcement just went live on every major news platform. CNN, Fox Business, MSNBC are all running the story. Social media is connecting it to the discrimination video. Marcus checked his own phone. The hashtag #ApexAirRacism had now been joined by Karma's Real and Justice Served. Jennifer Santos's live stream had been viewed over 2 million times, and news outlets were broadcasting the footage of his removal alongside breaking news alerts about the Vanguard acquisition. "Time to board our airplane," Marcus said. Sarah Martinez approached the gate agent who was preparing to close the door for final departure. "Excuse me, we need to board this aircraft immediately. I'm the legal counsel for the new owner of Apex Airlines." The gate agent looked confused. "I'm sorry, but the manifest is closed and we're ready for pushback." Elena Rodriguez stepped forward and handed the agent an official notification letter. "This aircraft is now under new management effective 37 minutes ago. We need immediate access for an ownership inspection." While the legal team sorted out boarding procedures, Marcus stood at the gate window, watching the passengers inside. He could see Victoria Ashford laughing with other first-class travelers, probably regaling them with her version of the security incident she had helped resolve. David Miller was still recording discreetly, sensing that the story wasn't over. Jennifer Santos was providing commentary to her live stream audience about the aftermath of discrimination. "Ladies and gentlemen," the gate agent announced over the intercom, "we're experiencing a brief operational delay. Please remain seated while we address a corporate matter." Inside the aircraft, Rebecca Martinez picked up the intercom to address passenger concerns. "Folks, we apologize for this additional delay. We're dealing with some last-minute paperwork issues that should be resolved shortly." Captain Hayes was getting increasingly frustrated calls from operations. "Captain, we're getting contradictory information about new ownership protocols. Legal is saying something about a new CEO, but we don't have any official notification." "Operations, I need clear guidance here. Do I have authority to depart or not?" "Stand by, Captain. We're trying to sort this out at the corporate level." Back at the gate, Marcus was finally cleared to board. As he walked down the jet bridge for the second time that day, his entire demeanor had transformed. The exhausted passenger in the hoodie was gone, replaced by a billionaire CEO who owned everything he was about to walk into. The aircraft door opened and Marcus Williams stepped back onto his airplane. The transformation in the cabin atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Rebecca Martinez looked up from her paperwork and saw Marcus walking toward her, flanked by people in expensive suits, carrying briefcases and legal documents. Her face went through several emotions in quick succession: confusion, recognition, and growing panic. Sir Rebecca stammered, "You were removed from this aircraft. You can't." "Ms. Martinez Sarah." Martinez interrupted, stepping forward with legal authority. "My client has every right to be here. In fact, he has more right to be here than anyone else on this aircraft." Elena Rodriguez moved to the aircraft intercom while James Thompson began photographing the cabin layout for legal documentation. Marcus walked slowly down the aisle, making eye contact with each passenger who had witnessed his earlier humiliation. Victoria Ashford looked up from seat 2A with genuine confusion. "What is he doing back here?" Security removed him. "Mrs. Ashford," Marcus said calmly, stopping directly beside the seat she was occupying. "We need to talk." Captain Hayes emerged from the cockpit, his uniform giving him the confidence of authority. "Sir, I don't know how you got back on this aircraft, but I'm going to have to ask you to deplane immediately." Sarah Martinez stepped between them. "Captain Hayes, before you say anything else, I need you to review these documents." She handed him the official acquisition papers and ownership transfer certificates. "As of 42 minutes ago, you work for my client." Hayes looked at the documents with growing confusion and concern. The legal language was complex, but the bottom line was clear. Marcus Williams had acquired Apex Airlines and was now his boss. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Hayes said weakly. The only mistake Marcus said, his voice carrying through the entire cabin, was thinking you could humiliate someone without consequences. Elena Rodriguez stepped to the aircraft intercom. Her voice filled the cabin with professional authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give me your attention. I need to make an important announcement regarding this flight." The cabin fell completely silent. Even Victoria had stopped her protests, sensing that something fundamental was happening. "My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm the executive assistant to Marcus Williams, CEO of Vanguard Global Networks. At 3:02 p.m. today, Mr. Williams completed the acquisition of Apex Airlines. He is now the owner and CEO of this airline, this aircraft, and employer of every Apex Airlines employee." The silence in the cabin was so complete that the only sound was the air circulation. Rebecca Martinez had gone pale. Captain Hayes was staring at the legal documents like they might change if he looked hard enough. Victoria Ashford's mouth was hanging open in undisguised shock. But Marcus wasn't done. 45 minutes ago, Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority, "I boarded this aircraft as a paying passenger with a legitimate first-class ticket. I was discriminated against, humiliated, and physically removed because Ms. Martinez, Captain Hayes, and Mrs. Ashford decided that my race disqualified me from sitting in a seat I had purchased." David Miller, who had been recording everything, lowered his phone slightly in amazement. Jennifer Santos whispered to her live stream, "Holy shit, you guys. The passenger they kicked off owns the airline." Marcus continued addressing each of his tormentors individually. "Ms. Martinez," he said, turning to face the flight attendant who had started this entire incident, "you are terminated, effective immediately for racial discrimination, abuse of authority, and violation of federal transportation regulations." Rebecca's face crumpled. "You can't. I've worked here for 15 years. I have seniority." "Your seniority ended when you decided that people like me didn't belong in first class," Marcus replied. "Security will escort you from the aircraft." He turned to Captain Hayes. "Captain Hayes, you are grounded permanently. Your pilot's license will be reviewed by the FAA for abuse of authority, filing false security reports, and discriminatory enforcement of airline policies." Hayes tried to maintain his authority. "The pilots' union will fight this." "You can't just—" Marcus cut him off. "Captain, the pilots' union will review the footage of you calling a 32-year-old black man's son while threatening false arrest. I'm confident they'll distance themselves from your behavior rather quickly." Finally, he turned to Victoria Ashford, who was sitting in his seat, looking like she had seen a ghost. "Mrs. Ashford, your diamond medallion status with Apex Airlines is revoked effective immediately."